The first thing we're going to do is talk about that regional I attended on Saturday, which was the regional in Montabaur in Germany, which had over 500 people. It was a pretty big regional, actually, pretty massive. We played 9 rounds, and I brought Fiendsmith Ryzeal because I felt like that was the deck that looked the most fun. I did go to this tournament with a couple of things in mind. I did want to get some more understanding of the currently most represented deck in the format, which has a realistic chance of still being the most represented deck for YCS Birmingham. And the other reason is I wanted to go to see if the format actually was as fun as I was expecting it to be, because it really looked like just something I wanted to play. I am here to report that out of my 9 rounds, a lot of them were very, very fun. Even some of the ones I lost had some very good games in it. I did end up going 6-3, losing a whopping 6 dice rolls out of 9 rounds, which was kind of frustrating. At some point, I think I was 1-5 in dice rolls or something. The reason why I'm not too discouraged by that, and the reason why I still think it was a good tournament experience and a good format overall, is because the losses I had, I felt like were things that I had rather little control over. It doesn't sound great, but it is actually not a bad sign, because that's something that happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! It happens to all of us. Sometimes you lose a game because you're not meant to win it. For example, in round 2, I lost to Fiendsmith Malice. I lost the dice roll. They opened good hands in game 1 and game 3, and my Fiendsmith Ryzeal deck played a lot of Bystials as the hand traps, so I didn't have a lot to do against the Malice portion of their deck. In game 3, I opened triple Lancia, but they opened double Fiendsmith cards, so they beat that. In round 7, I lost to Plants, which is a very European thing to do, because I lost the dice roll naturally. I don't think I've ever won the dice roll against Plants in my life. I looked at my hand in game 1. It was 1 Baldrake. They activated Unexpected Die, summoned Lokai in their 60 card deck, and I scooped it up. It was 5 seconds. I won game 2 because I went first. Game 3, my only hand trap was Nibiru. My hand was pretty good, so I felt like maybe I could break it, because they also didn't have the perfect combo start. But then I watched them for 10 minutes or something, and at the end of the combo, they summoned Cactus Bouncer, so I couldn't special summon, which was very cool. And then in round 9, the last round of Swiss, I lost to Lampi. I think I would have won the game otherwise, but I lost in time to just like normal summon Pydra and droplet my SP Little Knight to just attack over it for a little bit of damage in game 3, which was very annoying. Sometimes that happens. The other matches, the ones that I didn't lose, I actually had a lot of fun in, and they were really good games where people also played really well throughout the entire day. It was very enjoyable. I played Fiendsmith Ryzeal with a little bit of a twist that admittedly isn't my own idea. I've made changes to it, but the concept has been popularized, I think, a week earlier at the Italian Open by some players. It did get, I think, 2nd place at the Italian Open. Yeah, Danilo was the name of the player that played it at the Italian Open. It doesn't play Ryzeal Duo Drive, and it doesn't play some of the one-offs that you usually search with Ryzeal Duo Drive. So for the Fiendsmith package, you're playing 3 Engraver, 1 Lacrima, 1 Lurie, 2 Tract, and 1 Fiendsmith in Paradise. It's not really a Ryzeal deck. It's Fiendsmith, Bystial. Fiendsmith is the best engine in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. Bystial is just really good against Fiendsmith, and both of those engines are really good at grinding, but they also both don't really use their normal summon, and you don't really want to rely only on Fiendsmith as your engine, because then you're too weak to Bystial. So you're like trying to add another engine into this deck that is a good normal summon, and that best normal summon is just Ice Ryzeal for now. People have been doing the same thing with Fiendsmith Bystial, and their normal summon is some Tenpai cards, but in this version, the best normal summon is Ice Ryzeal because it gives you access to the Fiendsmith combo plus follow-up. Yeah, live twins, all this kind of stuff. Fiendsmith plus Bystial plus normal summon is a very good concept. I'm doing 3 sword and 2 X. The day before the regional, I was thinking about doing 3-2-2, simply because sword and X are not the best starters. You can start with them, but then you're locked out of doing any of the Fiendsmith things, right? And that's not ideal. They are very good extenders though if your initial stuff gets stopped. Specifically in this one, you play 3 sword Ryzeal over 3 X because X doesn't start your combo if you use anything on your opponent's turn. Basically, if you have a body on the board already, which happens a lot because you play Bystials, you play Nibiru, and you can see over here Scythe King Phantasme, those sort of cards, you can't X anymore after you do that. Even if you start with Fiendsmith in your hand, you can do the Fiendsmith stuff and then normal summon sword, and that's completely fine, but you can't do that with X. So that's why X is like the worst Ryzeal in this one to start with. And then there's obviously 3 bonfires. I've searched X Ryzeal with this card 0 times. You just search Ice Ryzeal. For the Bystials, these are obviously in this deck because they offer you some sort of grind game. They offer you extra bodies to go into Moon of the Closed Heaven, to go into the Fiendsmith cards, but they also are here because they counter other Fiendsmith decks the best, right? It's very popular. In order to enhance the grind game of these guys, I also played Lubellion. The original version of this deck played 3. I only played 1 because we were worried about Lubellion just being a little bit too slow going second. You would rather have more active cards like Effect Veiler and stuff like that I added instead. I still wanted 1 with Regained, of course, because Regained is a really good card in the grind game. With Lubellion being at 1, you essentially still have 3 copies of Branded Regained, because you could just hard draw it, which honestly in a deck with 7 Bystials isn't that bad. You can draw Lubellion, or you can just draw Magnamute and search the Lubellion in the long run, right? That's why in order to make some space in the deck, I went down to 1 Lubellion because I kept the deck 40 cards. I could see going up with Lubellion if you want a better grind game with Regained, and going first, like Lubellion is just a monster, right? A lot of the stuff in this format, I noticed there's like so much grind game happening right now. Like the amount of games that I played that went to like turn 4, 5, 6, 7 or even longer than that was actually impressive. It's been a while since I've played such long and grindy games that often in a tournament. It was very fun. And this is where these cards really shine. And if you want to put more emphasis on that, you would put more Lubellions. Also, in general, the day after the regional, I posted the list over on my Patreon, where I also gave people the opportunity to ask some more specific questions, and I've been trying to answer them all. If you want to look at the Patreon options, you can check the description down below. I will still always be posting these deck profiles on YouTube. It's just going to be a little bit earlier on Patreon, but the lists themselves, they're not going to be hidden or behind a paywall or anything like that. That's the Bystials and the Fiendsmith, which leaves you with exactly 12 slots for non-engine, which I've chosen to be Nibiru, Ash, Veiler, and Talents. Talents to me in this format right now feels like a no-brainer. One of the best cards against Ryzeal going second. They can make Desiree if they're playing Fiendsmith, but most of the time you are making Caesar with the Fiendsmith cards and not Desiree when you're going first. And against the board like Desiree Detonator, Talents is just so powerful. You don't need to hand trap Ryzeal, but having an out for a potential duo drive I think is still very important. That's why I still wanted to play the Ash and the Effect Veilers, which in a format where a lot of people play triple tactics Talents, you might think like, hey, why is there Effect Veiler and not Imperm in this deck? Effect Veiler is a light monster, so it gives you Bystial synergy in some of the matchups that don't play a lot of lights and darks, but more importantly, Imperm can be very awkward if you draw it together with Bystial. Because the way it works against Fiendsmith, if you're trying to prevent the Caesar from coming down, you need to Bystial first. Imperm is not good against the Fiendsmith portion, but most decks start with the Fiendsmith portion. That's why with a heavy Bystial count, I didn't like Imperm. I think it's fine to play Imperm if you cut down on some Bystials. In this version, I didn't think it was necessary. I also don't think this deck needs an absurd amount of like traditional hand traps. Of course, the Bystial cards against some decks are kind of like hand traps, but they're not really hand traps against something like Malice. Nibiru is good in this deck because it's one of the few ways you can beat Malice going second in game 1. These 9 generic ones seem fine to me. There isn't really that many decks right now that you need to hand trap, otherwise you can't win. Even the Mirror, like if you don't draw a hand trap or like just one Bystial or something like that, it's fine. And that's the 40 card main deck. Considerations: Lubellion could go up to 3, it could also go lower. I also think that in general, a lot of the times at this tournament, I felt like while Ice Ryzeal is certainly the best normal summon in theory that you could have in a Fiendsmith deck, because here's the thing that Ice Ryzeal does. If you're playing a Fiendsmith deck, you go Ice Ryzeal, you summon X searches Sword, you would make Exciton Knight, which is your light fiend, which gives you Fiendsmith access here with a sword in hand. So you go through your Fiendsmith stuff, you summon Sword, and then you have 2 options. You either go Sword, add another ice for follow-up, or you go Sword, add the second X, special it to make a detonator. So essentially 1 ice gives you a light fiend on the board plus a detonator, which is pretty good. I don't really have complaints about it because let's be real, the games that I lost, I don't feel like it was a deck issue. Like if I'm losing the dice roll against Plants, I probably should be losing that match because it's a dice roll ad deck. And then against Malice, Fiendsmith as well, it's also really hard going second. I don't really blame the deck for those losses. Extra deck is probably the most interesting. This is where the Ryzeal cards have the biggest downside because the Fiendsmith engine already has a very tight extra deck. If you add Ryzeal into the mix, it just becomes very, very tight. and I did not play as many of the Ryzeal options as I would like. So there's 2 detonators, no duo drive. There's an Exciton Knight, which is a very good summon. It's also good into Malice boards, and it's obviously a Light Fiend, but sometimes you just send this one for X Ryzeal to have another Light Fiend in the graveyard, which can be really nice. There's an Abyss Dweller because you are playing a rank 4 focus deck, and this card is very good in some Fiendsmith grind games. The most important application for Abyss Dweller is to check this card in Fiendsmith mirrors, because let's say you summon Ice and X going second and they have set up for the trap card in the graveyard. Making any rank 4 here that just gets sent by Fiendsmith in Paradise isn't really useful. So you want to make Dweller here. Even if they chain the trap card to the summon of Dweller, you can still detach from it and prevent the thing that they send from activating. That's why Dweller is really important. Then there's a Wave High King Caesar and a Typh. That's it for the Exceed. I did not play Aggregator because I do not plan to start off my turn going second with X Rising, because that locks you out of everything you're trying to do. And a lot of the time, you even have cards like Nibiru on the field or Bystials to the point where starting with X Ryzeal is not only suboptimal, but it also doesn't even work. Going second, I actually sided out one X Ryzeal a lot because I didn't want to draw this card. I wanted it to be in my deck for Ice Ryzeal as a target. If I draw it, worst case, I can make it work, but I don't really want. I don't think I missed Aggregator. You really notice that I do feel like the Fiendsmith part is the important part of this deck. I really focused on playing those Fiendsmith grind games, right? And that's why I prioritized having access to double Requiem, because a very recent trend and a good thing to do, honestly, is to banish Requiem from your opponent's graveyard with a Bystial, because if this card is gone, the whole Fiendsmith engine loses a lot of grind game. So I played a second one, and this won me a bunch of games. Of course, you play Sequence, but I also played Agnum Day, which isn't a staple. I've made this card so much. Maybe it's about like my approach, because I've been playing Fiendsmith for a while now. You know, YCS Bologna, YCS Anaheim. I've always played different variations of Fiendsmith. I feel very comfortable in the Fiendsmith grind games. I try to put as much emphasis as possible on the Fiendsmith cards in my decks. While there are versions without Agnum Day, I just love this card so much. I think it's so good. I think being able to go Sequence into Desiree and then being able to link your Desiree off to still get the send effect immediately, but then still bring the Desiree back. So you're basically getting both advantages of Desiree immediately, right? Plus you're getting in so much damage with this card. Once I've played with Agnum Day, it just feels like I can't go back. You play Moon. A lot of decks, believe it or not, don't play SP Little Knight right now because of space issues. Basically, I cut Duo Drive and Aggregator for Agnum Day and SP because I just like these cards so much in the Fiendsmith grind game. So that's the 6 Link monsters I played, and I summoned SP a lot as well. Desiree, Necro Quip, and Chaos Angel are all self-explanatory. These cards happen a lot. To me, this is the biggest downside with the Ryzeal cards, is that there are 4 cards in this extra deck that you only play because you play Ryzeal as your normal summon. And yeah, Ryzeal is a really good normal summon, but I wish I could use these 4 slots for other Fiendsmith utility extra deck cards. You know what I mean? I would love to have like the second Desiree, maybe even go back to the M7 and Zeus package, the things that we played in other variants of Fiendsmith. I miss those. Whenever I'm past turn 1, 2, 3, and I'm out of Ryzeal cards anyways, I just want to have access to all these other options. But for now, I think the Ryzeals are the best normal summon you can play in Fiendsmith. So for now, the extra deck's going to be a little tight. The side deck, one of my favorite things about this format is that you can play Phantasme again, was pretty good for me. Although I will say it might not be 100% necessary, because you could also just immediately draw another good card like Purulia or something like that. Would also be an option here. Initially, the reason why this card wasn't main deckable is because it's good against Malice, but it's not good against pure Ryzeal because they don't link summon. Now that everyone is basically playing Fiendsmith Ryzeal, all of a sudden you can basically use Phantasme against both of the top decks. Theoretically main deckable. There's 3 Lanceas because, quite frankly, the Malice deck is just like, I don't want to be too negative about it. I'm just hoping I only play against Ryzeal decks whenever I'm entering a game in this format. Like, the Ryzeal games are so much more fun than the Malice games. It feels like an uphill battle going second. Like, if that deck plays, it's so scary, and that's why we're playing. I didn't put Chaos Hunter in because that feels unnecessarily risky against cards like Talents. 3 Charmies. We were thinking about main decking this card because it would help going second into something like Malice, which is the one thing I'm scared of with my main deck, because I'm playing a lot of Bystials. I'm not scared of going second in the mirror. Actually, in the mirror match for this deck, I felt like the dice roll was completely irrelevant. The Charmies I felt like were good in the side deck. because I can only put them into my deck when I know I'm going to go second. Who is we? The team, Raid and Trade. Obviously, I forgot to say that. Shout outs to Raid and Trade for prepping together as always. We did have some talks. Nico ended up winning the event with a similar list, not the exact same. Shout out. They also convinced me to play a Cowboy, which I never needed. I went into time once, which was against Lampy in round 9. That was the only time I got even close to time. I think the bigger problem going into time would even be something that Cowboy wouldn't even solve, because I would be scared about going second against Malice in time because they can like gain life points. In the mirror, you don't really need Cowboy because worst case, you're just going to have a draw, I suppose, because both don't have burn. So it's whatever. I did cut the third Metal Tronus for it, which I kind of regretted. This card was really good for me. It should have been a third one probably. I saw that Dogwood was in a lot of decks, but I didn't really get that. I didn't feel like the games take that long. The last card is just 3 strike because I wanted something that I can put into every matchup when I go first, and especially against Malice, I wanted something that was really good if I get shift. You can still make a detonator if you open ice. If you have strike on top, it's like really good. Isn't Judgment better? I think Judgment is worse because under shifter specifically, you could still die under Judgment because paying 4,000 is a lot. You could play both. Theoretically, maybe Judgment is better depending on the scenario. Maybe you could find a way to like put the Phantasmes in the main and also play Judgment. That's the deck. I still wanted to showcase the list, even though I did not do as well as I hoped for. 6 and 3 is not bad. I'm not like mad about it. And I still wanted to offer some input on what I thought about this deck because it is a variant of Fiendsmith Ryzeal Bystial that's been running around a little recently. So I wanted to offer my perspective on it. I do think this list was for regional purposes maybe a little bit too focused on beating the Fiendsmith mirror matches because I ended up in 9 rounds only playing against I think 4 other Fiendsmith decks, so less than half of my matches. So I did stare at a lot of Waldrakes going second, wishing they were other cards. But overall, if you're preparing for a big tournament where you expect a lot of Fiendsmith decks, I probably still would play 7. Hope it was insightful. If you're watching this on YouTube, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you think is the best pick for this current format before Supreme Darkness. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Thank you for watching.